did it all, but I think we got it. Yeah. Yeah, we just double teamed Gepper on his plan, transportation thing. Yeah, I got Shannon's like all in. I mean, it's a whole month. You just focus on student safety.
Yeah, that's it.
So when I met on the phone with Kathy and Lisa,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I know you're gonna get really angry, but they don't like our spreadsheet, the email thing. I said,
Yeah.
so we have to prove to them
Yeah.
that there's nothing there. And like the big thing for me is what's the plan year?
Yeah.
Okay? Is the plan year July to June, or is it September
There you
to
go.
August? Okay?
Yep.
The plan year is July to June, and that's confirmed. We have documentation
Yeah.
that shows that. So all those people that are rolling in, who've been here, plans going, most of dawn of time, they rolled in, no, not paying any insurance, right? Because
Yeah.
it was all free. And when they came to the year where they started paying, they were already covered. Like there was no break in service. Like he kept saying, at some point we paid for 12 and got 10. You didn't. It's almost like a flow chart. So I said to Kathy and Lisa, I'm like, I don't need this right now, but I'm gonna need like, gotta go back and see what you can find out dollar wise. I said, take at least a week. So that's what we were working on.
Oh,
I forgot. So Lisa's like, yeah, they didn't even really pay a full year's worth
Yeah.
in those beginning years too. So it's gonna be good.
I was just working on this upstairs refreshing. Thank you. I saw you on it and told me on it.
We actually have had it projected while you were working on it.
Oh, good.
You
You
know,
can see
I
all your
wonder-
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm wondering if he's gonna sit there.
I had no idea.
Maybe I should put him on. I could do this and then go forward.
Got a lot of very good feedback.
Okay, good.
Hey, Santa Claus, how you doing?
Hang it in there.
I went to,
I gotta
Get ready.
do it like
Just
on
keep it
email,
white,
so
don't make it
Word,
gray.
data recs
No, I'm
came
using
through.
different shit.
So I
All
print
right.
them out, all of them.
I got
Was
four,
in their data,
four
there's not
jobs.
enough money.
Aha.
Okay, so I sent them back, and I said, hey, here's your rec, there's only this much money in the budget,
Yeah.
either adjust it or do a transfer.
Yeah.
So one of them.
Yeah.
$30,000 budget, here's his PEs, we now spent $25,000. They're only paying $5,000. And then he says some nasty thing like blaming the business owner. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
So,
It's like,
What's this, like a little powwow over here?
yeah,
it
yeah.
is. Oh, that is pretty. I
All right,
like
thanks.
that.
I'm there. I won't. No, I'll wait till later. Oh, we're doing this tonight?
Just so you know, the high school managers that, okay, the business office simply processes what you order.
Yeah.
Having said that, I've attached 3 documents. The first one is 2425, which is our department for. The second one is the account analysis of the department. You can see all of it. The third one are all the POs, detailed POs, so you can see what exactly they charge. That's it. Let you know. I did it like in 2 seconds because I was just I'm fired up
Yeah.
by a lot lately. So he gets back. Thank you so much for your quick response. We are all reviewing this thoroughly. You do that.
And it shows that. Hey,
Well, but if you're not
oh, yeah, thank you. I replied to Cheryl and just said thank you, just so you know.
Oh, okay, great.
I mean, I broke protocol, but
Hello.
hello, hello. Forwarded our,
Hello, Governor.
to say that present
To our
thing.
board emails.
And to our private.
Are you presenting
how are you?
again?
I'm well, how are you? And listen, no, never.
Come on. I hear your entire committee.
Yeah, I'm not reading the whole thing. Especially since we have a presentation.
Exactly. Great.
I bet no. Should have got my
Yes, you're
instructions.
giving it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
You're giving it.
There's gonna be a lot of F-bombs.
It's your job tonight. Nobody told you?
What are we having a presentation?
What'd you say?
Is the dog for Junior? Yeah, the dog's here too. Dog's here?
Desi's
Yes.
here?
Desi's here.
Desi's
Desi's here. She's there just
No offense.
having.
My favorite board member is Desi.
That's what I told her too.
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
She's on strike.
So there's peanut butter cookies and then there's chocolate peanut butter cookies, and both are really good. So you'll just have to decide.
Oh, the mic's on? I didn't say anything.
That's okay.
No, I promise you, I don't threaten.
You were threatening.
No, I promise, I don't threaten.
You were threatening.
All right.
You were threatening. You were threatening me. Don't threaten me. You're threatening me.
Are we?
Meeting to order. Would we all rise for the flag salute, please? Will we all remain standing for a moment of silence for our armed forces and all those survivors of the hurricanes and all those in harm's way? Thank you. Statement of advance notice. The notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act of the State of New Jersey have been satisfied by the inclusion of the date, time, and place of this meeting in the notice of regular meetings adopted by this board on January 8th, 2024. Such schedule and notice of meetings is posted at the Municipal Building, the Mount Olive Library, the Board of Education offices, and the 6 schools, and was submitted to the Daily Record for publication on January 9th, 2024, and was filed with the Clerk of Mount Olive Township on January 9th, 2024. I direct that this announcement be entered into the minutes of this meeting. And we'll take a roll call, please.
Mrs. Aquino?
Here.
Mrs. Fenton?
Here.
Mrs. Figuera?
Here.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Here.
Mrs. Melendez? Mrs. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Orzillo?
Here.
Mr. Strelacci? Mrs. Narcisse?
I am here. And I'll take a motion for the approval of the minutes, Mr. Orzillo.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion approval of minutes 2.1 to 2.4.
Second.
Do we have any questions or discussion from the board members? Nope, seeing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mr. Orzillo?
Yes.
Mrs. Aquino?
Yes.
Mrs. Fenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Figuera?
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Strelacci?
Yes.
Mrs. Narcisse?
Yes. Do we have any communications or petitions from the board? No? Nope. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. Do we have a superintendent's report?
We do. I would like to invite Ms. McDermott, our assistant superintendent, who will be going over our NJSLA scores from the previous school year.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, no.
Thank you for having me tonight. I do want to share up front that this presentation is very dense, and a lot of the information that is in it is really determined based on state guidelines. So I will share an overview, and I'm not going to go through line by line the data on the slides. This will be shared on the district website, so anyone can go back and take a look at more detail at each of the slides. But things that we wanted to highlight are going to be in boxes in red, just to draw your attention to those lines as key talking points. But feel free to always go back and peruse it on your own whenever you have free time. So the NJSLA was administered this spring through our grades 3 through 9th grade students in both ELA and math. And the math course, whichever they're enrolled in, Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2. Our NJSLA for science was administered to our 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade students. So you'll see some different data points depending on what the actual different assessment is. Just to go over some reporting parameters, we have larger populations across the board in our NJSLA results, but when we get down to subgroups and when we get down to some of the other assessments, you're going to see a number less than 10 we can't report out on. And that's really because when we have students of that limited population, it can be identifiable information, and we wouldn't want to report out on individual student scores publicly. The scoring guide for NJSLA for ELA and math is as follows. And really what we're looking for is our students to be in level 4 or level 5, which people like to use the word as like passing. There's not really a passing, but it's meeting expectations of that grade level or exceeding expectations of that grade level. So when we're looking at our students' proficiencies, we're really looking at them to be in 4 and 5 and adding those two numbers up to see how many of our students really met those grade level expectations. Families were mailed home the ISRs, the individual student reports, and this is just a mock one, so you can see some of the information that was shared with families, where they had the student's name, where they ranged on that level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, what the school's average that they attend was, what the district average was, and what the state average was. And on the back of the ISR, it goes into a little bit more information about the breakdown of those scores. So those were mailed out, I believe, on September 27th from all the schools. If you have yet to receive your student's report and they were in a tested area, please reach out to your school principal because they have digital ones that they could possibly share with you. This information has also been released in Linkit in the parent portal. So again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me for access for your individual student scores. So this big slide is really about our participation in the assessments. And when you look at the ELA and math combined, the district administered almost 5,000 assessments for our students in the spring. And that is a huge testament to our administrative team to make sure that all of that is organized. Students who are not there on the original administration are given the opportunity to do the makeup assessment as well. And then obviously the support of our community and ensuring that families and students are taking these tests seriously and making sure that they're prepared and present on the days that the assessments are administered, so we have a lot of good information that we can make instructional decisions with. So specifically for ELA, I summarized the overall proficiency levels of each grade at the very bottom, and this is district-wide. So you can see we do have some variation across the board. The green is growth. The red is either a stagnant or a slight dip in our overall scores. But we're really looking to see some of that growth in grades 3, 4, 6, and 9, which we're excited about, and our 9th grade students showing the strongest amount of proficiency. So that is really important to us, that we're seeing that foundation grow over time, and that we know that we can pinpoint areas of growth with some of those other grade levels. These slides are really just looking at the different change from if levels 1 and 2 and then levels 4 and 5. And then it goes into it even further detail here. What I think is important for us to consider is level 5 is exceeded expectations for the grade level. And you can see in the 4th grade example, the district is outperforming the state 21% versus 14%, so by 7% in 2022, and then we see that continue growth in 2023, and then still in 2024, we're about almost 7% still above the state average, and that exceeded expectations. So that's a large chunk. Same thing for the 8th grade students. We're seeing them exceed expectations and seeing that growth. And then 9th grade, 35% of our 9th grade students exceeded expectations, not just met them. So that's a really big number that we really should be proud of, especially for our high school staff, and all the teachers who are building those foundational skills in the elementary and middle schools, that they are really exceeding at that 9th grade level. Some areas of celebration for our elementary schools. Our elementary, since there's 4 of them, it does break it down individually by school. And we see Tins Road and CMS in grade 3 showing some strong growth and achievement, with 60% of our Tins Road 3rd graders being in that meeting expectation, and seeing growth from last year to this year at CMS, which we are, always happy to see that level of growth. The same thing for grade 4. We have Mountain View and Sand Shore standing out here. Mountain View altogether has around 74% of their population meeting or exceeding standards. And then if you look at Sand Shore all the way to the right, that exceeding expectations box, 30% of their grade 4 students are exceeding expectations. That's a huge number and a huge jump from last year with almost 19% more students. As we look at grade 5, we can celebrate CMS with some growth both at the meeting expectations and exceeding expectations level for our 5th grade students. And that just really sets them up well for that transition into middle school. So each school has different grade levels that we really wanted to take a moment just to celebrate their achievement and the work of the teachers in order to prepare our students for those assessments. When we get down into the subgroups, our overall district average, this is what's coming up, not by school or not by grade level. And we're really right around like 40% in that light green meeting expectations and around that 19% being in the exceeding. So we do see some variation as we look at our Hispanic population, our Black students who are not as high in that exceeding level, and who have higher levels in that partially meeting area. If obviously we can't have our students meeting and exceeding, we really want them to be in that yellow group, but we see higher levels of students not meeting and partially meeting for some of those subgroup areas. The same thing for our subgroups by program. When we look at our ELL, or English language learners, in New Jersey we are calling them our multilingual learners. You see a higher level of them not meeting expectations. We'll look at why some of those reasons are when we look at another assessment called the Access, but those students are still formulating their English language proficiency. They are excused from taking the ELA the first year that they're in the country. After that, they are expected to sit for the assessment. So even if their language acquisition isn't as strong, they are expected to sit with their peers for this assessment. Our special education population is underperforming peers, and that is something that is definitely on our radar and something that we are addressing through different interventions and different supports that we have. Overall, areas that we can focus in on for ELA, specifically for elementary, we had wonderful support from the Board of Education in the spring of last year to hire two new supervisor roles, one K-5 ELA, a K-12 multilingual and intervention supervisor, which have been tremendous additions to the district. Both of them have brought a lot of expertise and experience to the roles and have really helped us build some of those supports for students that are struggling a little bit, and who also are going to help us build that further cohesion between the 4 elementary schools for continued growth. We also were able to add an ELA coach, and that person is really there to support staff, to make sure that they understand how to implement some of these strategies that are research-based and are going to help our students move and progress and build those foundational skills. So we think that that team alone is really going to further our progress with our student achievement. We also had continued emphasis on Foundations, which is our phonics program in K through 3. Last year was its full year implementation across those grade levels. So I think, that first year we're always going to see some growth, but then only continue as teachers learn to master that and students have more years within that foundational skill set. We also are continuing our partnership with Living Literacy, which are consultants that come in several times a year to work with our staff. They go to a building per day and pull the teachers out by grade level to have some professional development. And I think the most impactful part of that professional development is modeling the strategies with students. So the consultant will pull a group of students, model that strategy with them, and the teachers can really see what it looks like in action, and also in action with a stranger and how the kids are responding. So they only are going to be more comfortable doing that with their own class. We also are piloting the ELA curriculum that was written over the summer with a smaller group of teachers just to work out some of those kinks. And the main focus of that is really founded in the research for now I'm going to forget, the science of reading, thank you, and the science of reading and the interdisciplinary approach that that's asking for of our staff. And then we've expanded the pilot, which was just third grade last year, to K through 3 with iReady. It's a different diagnostic than the Linkit assessment, and it also marries to a new learning platform. So our staff had some initial PD on that in August, and then just had additional pull-out PD, which looked at the actual data after the students took the diagnostic, and there was a strong feedback from the staff that they really felt like that was impactful and helpful for them to move their practices forward in the classroom. So a lot going on at the elementary level in support of those foundational skills for ELA. Secondary, we've added dedicated professional learning community time for increased collaboration, innovation, and implementation of evidence-based strategies, as well as this year we're really focusing on developing a skills scope and sequence for 6-12. So what does writing look like at the 6th grade level? What are some of those products we want that student to be able to produce? And then how do we build on that each grade level so that we don't hear like, we've never done this before, right? We've done it, we've mastered it, and we're moving on to a little bit more of a challenging skill. At our last presentation, we talked about 2 new curriculums that really are focusing in on some of the new vision that we have for ELA at the middle and high school. So grade 6, 7, and English 11, really focusing on thematic approaches, interdisciplinary instruction, assessments, and highlighting a lot of opportunities for students to make choices in what they read and how they demonstrate their knowledge of that. Okay, so that's just ELA, one assessment. Here we go, math. So up front, our math scores can use improvement. And it's not necessarily the scores that are as impactful to myself and Dr. Banja. It's just demonstrating that the students don't have mastery over the standards to move to the next grade level and to have that really strong foundation. And you can kind of see that in how the scores decrease from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th down to 8th grade, right? That like the students aren't building on that knowledge. It's becoming a little bit of a shakier foundation. We do see some positive movements in our Algebra 1 middle school. Those students are placed into there as a little bit of an advanced track, so they are going to outperform. And our Algebra 2 middle school, it's red. 85% of our students meeting or exceeding is excellent, but it's down from last year. That's the only reason it's in red. Okay, we are excited about that number as a whole. And then our Algebra 1 for high school, we did discuss this a little bit at our presentation over the summer with our NJGPA. This course is broken up into 2 years and is for our students who have, as they're coming into high school, need the most support on their math skills. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement altogether on our math scores, and that we are fully aware of that.
Just a quick,
Go ahead.
just to confirm, grade 8 that's the accurate number? That's not a,
No, that's the accurate number.
just checking.
Yep.
I was hoping the decimal was wrong. What I was thinking.
So our grade, our level 4 and 5 is that meeting exceeding. You can see across the district, we're pretty stagnant. A little bit of growth, a little bit of areas for improvement there. Again, when we look at our geometry in high school and algebra 2 at the middle school, it's down 11%. There are fewer kids in that bucket of algebra 2 students, so even 1 or 2 students moving down could impact that greatly. So I just wanted to highlight those larger numbers. Again, this is just an overview of each grade level, each of the levels that you can delve further into that. When we look at the grade level specifically for math at the elementary, Tins Road in grade 3 really did a wonderful job. 70% of the students were meeting or exceeding expectations, and that is a significant amount of growth even from the year prior, which was about 7% less. We also want to highlight Mountain View at grade 4. You can see it at that exceeding expectations. Last year, 1% of the students did. This year, 12% did. So that's a lot of growth in 1 year in that highest category of students that are really outperforming. And then Sand Shore had some nice growth altogether as well, with increasing their students at that exceeding expectations level. And then for grade 5, CMS had some wonderful growth at that exceeding expectations level as well, going from around 7% to 14%. So we do have some pockets of success here, and we really did ask the principals to kind of highlight those things at the beginning of the school year and look towards these teachers to say, like, what are you doing that's successful with these students, and how can we replicate that in other classrooms or other grade levels so we have more of our students building on those skills and being able to be successful as well. When we look at our data in terms of race, again, our white population on the right-hand side is reflective of the general performance of around 40% and 10% at that meeting and exceeding. So our Black students and our Hispanic students are underperforming their peers at this level. The one positive piece is that they are a larger majority in that approaching. So that's something that's important for our staff to know, that they're like close to meeting expectations, and what are some of those shifts that we can make instructionally to get them over the hump to be in that meeting category. Same thing by program. We have our Section 504 and Gen Ed students performing similarly with our students in our free and reduced lunch, multilingual students, and our special education students seeing that they're struggling a little bit. And again, some of that with our multilingual students, they're not excused their first year for math. They're expected to sit with their peers their first year in the program, in the school, and sit for the same math assessment. So again, not that we're not worried about those scores, but it does take some look at like exactly who those students are, what has been their historical experience with math, and how can we continue to support them. So the math actions are pretty similar, K-12. As again, we were excited to be able to add a K-5 math supervisor to really focus in on math at the elementary level, and as well as our multilingual and intervention services supervisor as well. Our grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Algebra 1 and geometry teachers are all going to Conquer Math Professional Development this year, which is a series of PDs that range from about 5 sessions, some of them are out to 8 sessions, of full day professional development, where they're really focusing on math content, the math standards, and an approach to teaching math. So it's not a program, it's not a textbook, it's a research-based strategy of looking at concrete students working with manipulatives and seeing what's in front of them, being able to then draw that out in a pictorial approach, and then finally getting to the abstract. And really that's building the students' understanding of like, why are we doing these things, and not just like y equals mx plus b. Just know it, memorize it, right? Kids need to really understand how that comes to be and why that is the equation for that. So we're really trying to build that conceptual understanding of math from the early grades so that we can build on that. There is consistency in how the students approach math, and we see that continued success. Really thinking about our own classroom assessments, matching the rigor, the content, and the structure of these major assessments that we see throughout the year in iReady or Linkit, or summative assessments like the NJSLA or NJGPA. Just like ELA, we've also really focused on dedicated professional learning communities for all of our staff. Math has had some exposure to this, and I think that just more time together and really being able to look at those standards and how are we approaching them and sharing those best practices is going to really support our staff and move the needle for our students. We also have our our elementary and middle school teams looking at our current program, our textbook series really, and seeing like, is that the best fit for us because our contract is up this year? So is this something that we want to move forward with and continue, or do we feel like a different resource is going to be better served to align to the new standards that are expected to be implemented in the fall next year, as well as these different approaches that we're asking them to make and moving towards a conceptual understanding of the content? And then our middle school and high school will really take a look this year at our course sequencing and make recommendations for future program. As we mentioned, that high school class that's split up into 2 years, is that really serving our students? Are we seeing the outcomes that we anticipated from that? Or is it time to really take a look at how we can better support our students with a different sequence? Okay. Science. Science is a little bit different. because instead of having 5 different levels, there's 4 levels. So we're really looking at students being at level 3 or level 4, and students are only taking this assessment in grade 5, 8, and 11. And one of the things about that is that there's multiple years of science being assessed in that one assessment. So students are really expected to have an understanding of those prior years. 5th grade and 8th grade, it's a little bit different when you get into 11th grade and you're looking at chemistry, biology, and physics all in one assessment. It is a lot to ask of our students, but we definitely can improve our performance on this assessment. I think one of the things that will support that is we did shift our 6-12 supervisor to be K-12 and to really look at how are we approaching science instruction in the elementary school to build those foundational skills so that they're a little bit more ready for rigorous science courses in the middle school that we can build again on in the high school. So I think having that holistic approach in the vertical articulation will really help us improve where we're at now. Just like I said before, our overall students tested is very strong, and that is really kudos to our community and our administration for making that happen. And again, one of the things, it breaks it down by elementary school, some areas of focus. Tins Road had some wonderful progress in our grade 5 students from last year to this year, with increasing about 11%. CMS had students at level 4, that advanced proficiency, grow about 8%, and Mountain View about 3% as well. So we do have some pockets of success, again, to mirror what we want that instruction to look like, and to delve into what do they do differently, or how do they structure their classroom instruction to see that level of improvement. Similarly to our ELA and math, we're seeing our Hispanic and Black students underperforming their peers. Here we do see that their highest level is in that below proficiency, the lowest level. So that's something for us to really consider and think about, how are we building their skills in order to move them into higher levels of proficiency. And the same thing for our different programming. Our multilingual and special education students, you can see, really are struggling on these different assessments, and that's something that we really need to focus in on and build their capacity with as we go through the grade levels. Our DLM is the dynamic learning map. Thank you. I was like, we've gotten through a lot of acronyms so far. So it is for an assessment that assesses the same content areas of ELA, math, and science for our cognitive disabled students, that really, even if they sat for the NJSLA with modifications, it still wouldn't be an appropriate assessment for them. So this is the most appropriate assessment for these students. And as you can see, as I mentioned before, when we get to that end number that's less than 10, we wouldn't want to publicly report on those students' performance. So you can only see some of the bands here, and taking a look at overall our numbers in grades 3 through 5, we have 15 students assessed. In grades 6 through 8, 14 students assessed, and all grades altogether, 33 students. On this assessment, most of them are at that emerging level, which means they just really do need a lot of further support in developing those skills in science, ELA, and math. For the math, same thing. Most of our students are sitting in that emerging level at 68%, so we just need to provide some further support and develop those foundational math skills. A lot of these students are not going to be in your traditional math setting where they're going to be in an Algebra 1, classes like that, but they really do need to have everyday math about how to do money and how to add, that is going to be impactful for how they are successful later in life. And the same thing for science. We have a larger majority of our students at that emerging level. So really thinking about how we can support them with different science experiences to make sure that they feel proficiency at that. Our Access for ELS is an assessment that is designed for our multilingual students. The scoring of this is much, much different, and there isn't something where we like, the passing is in that 6th category, the reaching, but it really depends on where our students start, right? So if students are coming into the district, they take an assessment so we can see where they should be placed and what level of support that they would need for as a multilingual learner. and then we continue to build their skill. So some students might be in the program for several years. Some students might have had prior exposure and only been in the program for 1 year. It really just depends on how quickly they acquire the language and are able to then fully immerse themselves in a traditional schedule here in the district. So if you look at the grade bands of pre-K through grade 5, we have 148 students that were assessed last year as part of the program. And they kind of vary with the highest percentage of students at that developing range. And what those different markers really mean of entering, emerging, developing, expanding is really what can the teachers expect from that student to do in the classroom with the language skills that they do have. So the output of this report is much different of here's where your student falls in proficiency. It's similar to that, but we call them can-do statements. The student can do X, Y, or Z, and then therefore you should continue to expect that from them and build on those skills within your classroom. Grades 6 through 8, we have about 42 students that were assessed. The biggest group, again, falling in that developing. And then grades 9 through 12, we have 28 students, and the biggest in that emerging. So it really just depends on where students are entering when they enroll within schools here, what their language acquisition is, and then how are we building that through our multilingual program. I will say that the addition, again, of that supervisor role of multilingual and intervention has really already started to streamline and support our multilingual teachers, even to the point they're attending a conference this week early on in the year to make sure that they're aligned. They had time today during our professional development day to discuss best practices and how we're making that articulation within the program itself be the most supportive for our students. So I think those are wonderful additions to the administrative team and the support of our students. And then again here, it just kind of gives you a little bit of a different viewpoint on that. Lastly, last assessment, okay, our advanced placement results. So there's a lot of information about advanced placement and how you can kind of look at it. I think the biggest two pieces are those participation rates that are highlighted in that column, mostly in the middle of the page, with how many students are participating, meaning the students that are enrolled in the class and the students that choose to take the AP exam, because they are two different choices. And then the amount of those students that then receive a 3, a 4, or a 5 on the assessment. A 3 is eligible mostly for college credits. A 4 and 5, it's a little, for colleges and universities that are a little bit more selective, you're in a better spot for those. But we really consider a 3, 4, or 5 doing well on the exam, and that's where we really want our students to be. So when you have larger numbers like English language being at 98 students, 95% of those students participating in the exam, and 73% getting a 3 or higher. When you have that many students taking the exam, those are stronger results, right? So the more access you provide to these assessments, you might see a decrease in the results, but you're really exposing students to college level work. And I think that's the most impactful part. The same thing when you look at these two departments of social studies and world language, you have those overall participation rates hovering right around 80%, and then the people receiving a 3 or higher right in those low 70% range. So we are really excited to see those numbers. One of the things that we're doing at the high school tomorrow, tomorrow PSAT? Wednesday. All of our students are taking the PSAT, and because College Board has kind of their hands in everything, College Board has created the PSAT, and what they do is provide us lists of students that are what they consider AP potential. And these students, they're saying, based on how they did on the PSAT, they have potential to do well in these particular courses. And we can use that information when it comes to scheduling and looking at, well, how many of these students are really signing up for these courses, because I think a lot of our families strongly believe that their students are going to go into a 2 or 4 year institution, or at least would want to have the choice to be able to do so. And so therefore, we want to make sure that we are exposing them to that college level work and those expectations while having the support of our staff here. So I think those are really important things for us to think about and considering when we think about equity and those different subgroups and making sure all of those students are really exposed and supported as much as we can in these courses. So that's it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the board? Mr. Strelacci?
Thank you. Thank you for your report. That's very informative. Forgive me if my questions are stupid, but I'm not an educator.
Tony?
There-
Could you
Just talk into
speak
the
a little
microphone.
closer to the
There's,
mic? Sorry.
I'm focusing in on grade 8. I always considered that as a stepping stone.
Yep.
And I've noticed that, of course, all these statistics can be skewed with a very small mitigating factor. But so you look over a period of time, and you were showing on the ELA screen that we continue to have a drop off from 7th grade to 8th grade. And I'm just trying to understand why that's the case. This is a pretty good drop off too. Is there some kind of understanding why that's happening?
In ELA or Max, we can go back to that
In
slide.
ELA right now.
Okay, so I guess the short answer is no. There's not a clear answer of why that's happening. I think one of the pieces is the demands of the standards change for students, and we need to be making sure that we're exposing them to that level of rigor that's assessed, right? So if our texts aren't as challenging as what they're seeing on these assessments, if the questions aren't questions they've been exposed to before, the level of thinking on a consistent basis, those are things that we need to up the rigor for in our ELA classes. And I know that we have been discussing that and wanting to ensure that scope and sequence of like, this is what's expected of an 8th grade student, so that we can hold that expectation clearly over all of our courses to ensure that we're lifting everybody up, so they have better exposure to that.
The other question was in math now, okay. I've sat here a long time and seen a lot of reports on math, and we have never, ever been really doing well in math for some reason. I'm talking about 8th grade again, okay? One year, we decided to drop geography and expand our course hour for math. And the next year was the first year we had a precipitous growth in math. Since that point, it's been the same situation. We've changed curriculum. You're working on curriculum all the time. You're doing this, you're doing assessments. I just fail to understand why we do not do better in math in 8th grade than we have been doing.
So I will say that the number that we have currently is not acceptable. And I think we are making that clear, that is not an acceptable level of performance for our community. I'm not sure how that was communicated in the past to staff, so I think that we've made that pretty clear. The other piece is so one of the reasons that we use that Linkit benchmark assessment, Form A, B, and C, is that it's supposed to be predictive of how our students are doing on the NJSLA. So as Form B rolled out last year and we saw the numbers that were coming in, they weren't outstanding and or different than what we saw the year previous. So the math supervisor and I met with each of the grade levels, 6, 7, and 8 at the middle school, and really looked at each of the standards and said, where are we teaching this in the curriculum, and to what extent have you been actually able to cover it to where you think the students mastered it? Not just like we got to it, right? That like we have ownership over this standard and our students are able to produce based on that. And that was a really enlightening conversation because some of the things that we thought were going on in 6th grade weren't. Some of the things that the teachers thought were going on in different grade levels. So we were really able to take some time to realign what the expectations were and really make sure they understood that these things are assessed at 6th grade, these things are being assessed at 7th, and these things are being assessed at 8th grade. And we really need to stay in our lane and make sure that we're doing those things well. So those conversations were really important and have also led us to finding those additional supports outside the district with them attending this Conquer Math training, which has been well received by the staff and has really, I went to the grade 8 specifically because it's an area of concern of mine as well. And the conversations that were being had of like, this is really helpful, meaningful lesson that I can implement tomorrow that will change the way my students perceive this, what we thought was like more procedural, to having a true understanding of it. So the students that are in our traditional grade 8 math are students that really need that extra level of support and visualization. And I'm going to say my hope, but that's not really hope. It's like strategic decision making around our math supports is that we do see this being impactful. The biggest thing is now our support of the staff on that and actually making the changes in the classroom, right? We can go to PD all we want, we can get a new textbook, but unless the practice in the classroom is changing, then we're not going to see those results change. So that's the other piece that we're looking at now, is how are we strategic about that and supporting our staff as much as possible to really implement that so we can see our students having those different experiences so that we can expect different results.
Ms. McDermott, do you want to mention the administration of the Linkit assessment and how that was adjusted this year to also provide us a clearer sense of where students are at the beginning of the school year?
Perfect, thank you. So one of the things that we looked at with Linkit specifically was the way that it was being administered and how impactful that was or not to the way the students kind of perceived the importance of that assessment. So both at the middle school and high school, we made adjustments to the schedule where students almost have a delayed opening schedule. And that first portion of the day, they were all placed within their tags or their homerooms and administered the assessment like it would have been for an NJSLA or NJGPA, creating that real test environment just to show the students the weight that we put on this and the decisions that we can make instructionally with better data from the students. And the amount of students, when we look at like the different levels and where students fell, we saw a significant increase in their performance just from that kind of like ability to take it a little bit more seriously and have both of the buildings really administer it in a way that was test-like in that environment.
And just to reiterate on that point too, is that these scores, like on Linkit and our benchmarking assessments, are really critical. Provides data to our teachers as to where their students are at that point of the school year to determine what standards that may have to be retaught, reemphasized, or in some cases, really their students have already achieved. So now that we're creating these environments throughout the school year, the teachers are able to utilize these benchmarks as an actual focus of how their kids are going to be doing on that state assessment later on in the school year. So, thank you to Ms. McDermott and the rest of the admin team for making that important change. And also, I think it's really critical, Mr. Stertolacci, you talked about what are we doing different because there has been historical concern about math performance. I think, right now, the team is focused upon engaging our teachers in conversation to ensure, as Ms. McDermott pointed out, what exactly is going on in the classroom. What we don't want to do is bring in more programs, different textbooks, without making sure that our teachers are involved in this very important conversation. So we spend a great deal of time in order to engage those conversations, our admin team meeting with their teachers in their buildings to determine where exactly, are the students struggling and how can we then support them? So it's a very calculated approach in which we're setting clear expectations with the teachers involved in the conversation, but also across the board, talking about, creating consistency and alignment of our practices. We have 4 elementary schools, right, who all feed into the middle school. And, what we want to make sure is that the experience at Sanshore, CMS, Mountain View, or Tints is the same so that when they do come into 6th grade, that we're not dealing with kids at different starting points, which creates a lot of stress on our 6th grade teachers. Right? So that's why it was the implementation of those supervisors, first of all, is to ensure that those practices are consistent. Also, the addition of the coach in order to provide the support in that classroom, but also the assessment of our students to be clear what are based upon state standards so that throughout the year we have a really great gauge, right, where exactly the students are so the teachers are able to adjust their instruction. And certainly, we're dedicated to be realistic and honest about the achievement of our students right now. And there's no, rose-colored glasses here, like, oh, we're doing great. We're not. We need to do better. And I think that we spent a great deal of time, even before we got these scores, in order to make some calculated decisions. And I know the admin team will agree. We worked really, really hard this summer. As far as the work that was done in order to prepare this for the school year. And Ms. McDermott and her team has done a great job in ensuring the PD that's offered this year is aligned to the needs of the students, most importantly. And, I don't know, Ms. McDermott, you want to talk about, our intervention services for our students as well, as far as when students are identified, for example, in Linkit, as student needed support. How do we go about doing that?
So each of our schools has intervention teams that are really looking at this data, whether it be from iReady or Linkit, and then the classroom teacher recommendations as well, to say that these students are really not exactly where we would think they would be or where we want them to be. And we come together as a team, take a look at, well, what are some strategies we've been using in the classroom to help support them? And sometimes just doing those a little bit more targeted can help support a student and get them where they need to be. Other times we need to offer tier 2 services where students are meeting with an interventionist at varying different levels throughout the week to build in those foundational skills. So they're not really teaching what that grade level is doing. They're teaching, well, what's missing from that first grade or that kindergarten skill that's going to really put them at the ability to work with their peers at that second grade level. So they're still getting the instruction in their classroom, but they're also building those other skills back in and making sure that we're not just moving them on without filling in those gaps. If students are not responding to those tier 2 interventions as well, we can level it up to tier 3, which might be more frequency or different types of strategies that we're using. And we really try to do that in segments of 8 to 12 weeks, looking at that data and how that student is performing, and then making adjustments to those plans in order for us to be responsive to the student and also make sure that we aren't just keeping them in these programs for forever without making those strides with that student. So we want to always tweak and revisit and make sure that we're also giving them time to show us progress.
And one last thing, do you want to speak about the platform in which we utilize our intervention plans are now, which is also going back to the theme of consistency and alignment?
Yep. So we have purchased a piece of the Linkit platform called Intervention Manager. And what that does is, well, we purchased 2 pieces, Intervention Manager and Data Warehousing. And what that allows us to do is put all of our student learning data into one spot. So even though our K through 3 students are utilizing the iReady assessment, it still speaks to Linkit, and we can see all those results come in. Our students that are taking assessments with our teachers, like the Fontes and Pinnell, which is really assessing where they're at in their reading levels, all of that is put into the program in order for us to have all of our data in one spot, be able to look at students across multiple measures to see where might they need more support. Within Intervention Manager itself, there's a collaborative way for us to build tiered intervention plans so that principals can see them, guidance counselors can see them, the interventionists, the teachers, and everyone can share information about this one student so that it's not pulling from a million different places or we're looking at all these different documents. And it really outlines very clearly within that platform of what services are we providing, what's the timeline, who's responsible for what, and then we can come back and revisit that at other meetings. So I think that having that structure in place that's implemented across the 6 schools has really been helpful for us to really be honest about what are the intervention strategies we're utilizing in the classroom, what are we trying with them in those tier 2 or tier 3 services, how are they impacting the student, and then how can we revisit them and either release them out of the program or provide some additional supports.
And just some clarification, so if you have a child coming from Sanshore who may have had a plan in 4th grade coming to the middle school, because they use the same platform, they're going to be able to see what areas of concern they may have had 2 school years prior. So once again, making sure when they get to the middle school, that staff is clearly aware of struggles some students may have had because they're using the same platform to capture the data, but also to develop those plans so the fact that they can look at how to better support that child. So those are some of the some of the many things that we're trying to do in
And
order
students
to.
coming up from 5th grade this year, we're
Yes.
like automatically receiving intervention services,
Yep.
so that we can make sure that that summer slip or whatever you want to call it, that we are able to support those kids right away and aren't waiting for that like new data at a new school to get started. We're finding them right away and making sure that that's consistent support for them.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment? I just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Strelacci's comment for 8th grade, only because I do agree with you wholeheartedly. However, Mrs. McDermott shared with the C&T committee the evidence statements from our testing results. And just in regards to 8th grade, the 8th grade algebra scores are really, really good. Much higher than the 9th grade algebra scores. So just since you asked about 8th grade, those
Thanks.
should be noted.
Can I ask, just for clarification, when we're understanding the scores, when we're looking at 1 grade, 4th grade, and you're looking at year over year, you're not actually looking at the same batch of students. It's
Correct.
4th grade from year prior. So what I'm actually wondering is, do the parents get a report, or is the report that actually comes down to actually the student to say, hey, you've improved your scores or how you take the test or what you're retaining year over year, in like a growth method for each, grade or each student?
So in Linkit, the parent portal, parents can see the past years of how they're performing on Linkit and NJSLA. In a clean version, though, no, there isn't a report that the state has provided that like allows that to be seen clearly based on like different standards. We do have that information, but by like school and grade level. So I can track students that were in 3rd grade, how they moved and did in 4th grade, and how they did this past year in 5th grade to see the same students in different grades. That would have made this presentation much longer, but I'm happy to share that at C&T if we want to talk about that as well. Yeah.
One thing I would like to share with parents at home is that if you look at your child's report that was mailed to you, on the bottom of the first page, it will tell you how much your child grew in comparison of the kids who performed like them last year. So you will see that, for example, that your child outperformed 80% of the kids who scored similar to them last year. So that is available on that parent report. So it's about the last line both for math and ELA. So you'll see that. But so from an outward parent facing, you can go run to your kitchen drawer where you put that report, and you can pull that out and see where that growth is as far as how your child performed in comparison to other kids like them the previous year.
Thank you. And one other question. A lot of students taking AP classes. How are we doing, and maybe this is the takeaway, with enrollment in dual enrollment with our local colleges? I know that's another option that many students do have, and I know that a lot of the narrative is often around just the AP classes and courses, but we do have other options out there. I was wondering if we have any idea how our enrollment is and how those students are succeeding.
Perfect. So we don't have the exact numbers because students are still able to enroll this year in some of the courses depending on what institution that we partnered with. But I know that Mr. Feltman and Mr. Stansberry and I have in our docket to look at that as we build our next program of studies. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to, again, give our students exposure to college-level coursework. But as I think I mentioned, like Centenary has a course called Social Media Marketing. That would be a really interesting course for a lot of people, but it's never going to be an AP course, right? So how are we bringing in those different interests, I think is really important, not to duplicate what services AP offers, but to only build on them and create more exposure to that college level readiness that we really want our students to have. I just do want to put on the record publicly that like one of the barriers to dual enrollment is each institution has different criteria for our staff, and some of it is that a teacher must have a master's degree in that content area. Some of it is that they can just have a master's degree. So when we're adding these courses and adding dual enrollment, we need to look at our staffing and make sure that any student that's taking that class is eligible for the dual enrollment, and just because they have me and I have a master's degree and other students have Dr. Banja and she has a PhD, that we're not able to offer a dual enrollment for my students, that we want the same experience no matter who's assigned that class. So that's just one thing that we really want to take a look at and make sure that we're creating the most opportunities for the most students, but also in an equitable way.
And just a clarification for dual enrollment, just because a student is enrolled in that class that's designated as dual enrollment does not mean that they're going to achieve that. They have to then, in turn, register with that college. So right now, we have a number of courses that are dual enrollment eligible,
Yep.
but that 20 kids then would have to then, with the support of the teacher, the guidance department, the high school, register through, for example, Centenary or whatever college. So that's why those numbers are not available. So obviously kids are in those classes, but then they choose to, pay a certain fee in order to earn those potential credits for that class. So
And they do need to earn a certain grade in
Yes.
order to receive that credit from that institution as well. But it is a wonderful opportunity, and
Yeah.
we're happy to expand that program and to look at how to do so to build interest and build our college and career readiness in our students.
Do we have any other questions? I want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A lot of data, and I'm sure there was even more data that you
And to
narrowed
hold
it down
back,
to. And I do appreciate really too, on behalf of the board, the honesty and the rawness, and having solutions, identifying how, room for improvement. And I'm very happy that we have the multilingual supervisor. I've heard wonderful things, and I think that that's going to really support a lot of our students.
Absolutely.
I'd just like to thank Ms. McDermott. I think most people also don't recognize she's only been in this district since January.
Yeah.
So she certainly has hit the ground running and really developed a highly effective CIA team, curriculum instruction and assessment work. And also a huge thank you to our administrators and staff at home who are not here right now. Certainly it takes a village approach, and certainly we have a phenomenal staff who are dedicated to improve not only the academic achievement of our students, but also the entire life of our kids. They really do want to make sure that it's not only what's going on in that classroom from the academic sense, and they're doing a lot of wonderful work, so I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to our committee reports. And personnel, Ms. Aquino.
Yes, the committee met on the 7th of October, and just a few highlights. We discussed the current lead custodian stipends at each of the district's 6 schools, and all the lead custodians receive the same stipend amount regardless of the size of the school, and the disparity between the amount of the activities and responsibilities that are specific to the middle and high school. The committee agreed to pursue a proposal for EMO to increase the stipend for the lead custodian at the middle and high school. The committee also reviewed the roles and responsibilities of the sound and lighting employees. We also agreed to pursue a proposal that sets an established rate for employees that stay beyond their contracted hours to supervise students due to transportation delays in the afternoon. Dr. Bangia shared with the committee a proposal to change the title and expand the roles and responsibilities of the executive administrative assistant to the superintendent. Mr. Moore presented the new 2024 position control roster to the committee that organizes employees by school, title, department, and specific UPC, which is unique position code numbers, and it's brilliant, by the way. And the committee also discussed internal coverage options for the vice principal position at CMS. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the board? No? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Curriculum and Technology Committee report. Ms. Fenton?
Thank you. We met Tuesday, October 8th. We had the ELA curriculum K through 5, Dr.
Mastriani.
I can never say his name. Describe the work of the ELA curriculum pilot team. There are volunteers from each grade level and buildings that provide release times to review and implement the new curriculum, develop lesson plans, and gather resources to support and ensure a smooth implementation for the entire district in the fall of '25. Our tech report by Dr. Kreider. She reviewed technology updates, including the rollout of new Chromebooks for mom staff and the breakdown of help desk requests. We have full update online. Ms. McDermott shared her draft presentation to us, which you just saw, and she also provided evidence statements for us to review. And district initiative updates. Ms. McDermott provided an update regarding the district initiatives, including the positive feedback from staff about attending the first round of Conquer Math training. Staff have found it informative and meaningful. She also shared that the iReady pilot is underway with all grades 1 through 3 students completing the diagnostic and training for staff about data analysis, and the platform has also been conducted. Mrs. McDermott also explained that the middle and high school administrated the Linkits, which we just heard, in the new format, which had positive results. Lastly, the district staff, we are participating in EdCamp-style professional development today. So we will see how that went. Dr. Bangia shared that she has requested that building principals share all potential field trips with her for the year to ensure equity across the district. And that will be ready for our November meeting.
Do we have any questions from the board? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Finance and Operations. Ms. Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Okay, so we met also on October 8th. In attendance were myself, Dr. Bangia, Mr. Strelacci, Ms. Schoening, Mr. Orzillo, and Mr. DiMatteo. This is the time of year where I know the committee is finance and operations. We sometimes forget the operations part, but there's a lot of operations that go on in the district our size. And so getting the district ready to turn on heat is actually a really big undertaking. And so Mr. DiMatteo went over so many of the things that are going on in our district right now, obviously, to get ready, everything from HVAC work to, mold prevention, everything you can imagine. There's a lot of content in the committee report if you would like the details on a lot of the fun going on in operations. But one of the things that I do want to call out that we have been discussing is obviously with all of the operations, we have to also budget for a lot of these things coming up for the 25-26 school year, and that will include the need for modulars. What that means is we will have 2 at Mountain View, 2 at Tints, and 2 at the middle school, because I know we have talked about it before, but we are busting at the seams. And so those will be included in that upcoming budget. There's just no way around it, and we do have to pay for those. That comes with a cost as well. So just wanted to point that out as you guys are going through the operations report. One other thing on I guess a positive, happy note, we do have to buy buses. That does not sound like a good thing. It is a good thing. But we're purchasing some new buses. We had budgeted, obviously, for this. But thanks to our awesome staff being amazing at their jobs, we had budgeted an interest rate of like 4.2%, but Ms. Schoening and team got us a rate of 3.69%. Always love a little savings there. So yay. Positive. And that's kind of an overview of what we discussed.
Do we have any questions from the board? No? I will say thank you to Mr. DiMatteo for joining that meeting. It was very, very informative. There's a lot of work going on in this district. No questions? Other questions? All right. And then policy and governance, Ms. Melendez?
We didn't meet in October, so there is no report. However, we are scheduled to meet in November. It will be a heavy agenda.
I know Ms. Melendez is working on that agenda. And with no other comments then, with regards to our committee reports, do we have any board subcommittee and/or parent-teacher association liaison reports? The mic. Oh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Marini. I am one of the co-leaders for CPAG, or the Special Education Parent Advisory Group. We did meet on October 8th, and we decided to format the meetings a little bit differently this year, and so every other meeting, the directors will be joining us and kind of doing hopefully a spotlight on special services, and then the alternate meetings are going to be parent only. So this first meeting, we did have the directors come and join us, and they shared a lot of information. It was a little overwhelming, actually. But they did give direct overviews on some of the new staff and new positions, some of the professional development that they're offering, new initiatives, both with the New Jersey Inclusion Project, Preschool Consortium, Assistive Tech, and different PCASTs information. I'm sure I'm missing stuff. They also reviewed new opportunities in classes for our special education population. Some things that are coming up. This week, I'll be attending SEAC, which is the State Special Education Parent Advisory Council. I'm just an innocent visitor, basically.
What is it again? Will you say that again?
It's SEAC. So it's the State Special Education.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Advisory council that basically kind of is like the parent over CPAGs.
Love that.
And so, like for lack of a better explanation.
Awesome, thank you.
So that's on Thursday. It's virtual, so anybody can join in. We don't vote, obviously, for those, but the council has their very big, which we were actually fortunate enough that the not the director, but the assistant director came over the summer in special services, had Damian Patino come and speak to the staff about different things with behaviors and how to manage them in the students. We weren't involved in that. That was all special services, but he's on the board for SEAC. On this Friday, I'll actually be attending a Rutgers Facing the Future conference to talk about transition and all the stuff that's available with regards to potential employment and different things that are available for our special ed population. And then actually on October 21st, our CPAG and a couple different CPAGs across the state have collaborated to provide a webinar to our parents, as well as multiple parents across the state on the name of the webinar is What is Executive Functioning, and what does it have to do with ADHD? So I'm excited about that as well. Our next meeting is November 12th, and I'll be back to ask Ms. McDermott a question about DLM. An open comment, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions from the board?
I have one quick question.
Yep.
Do you record those meetings?
So no, because we did record them a while back, but then we kind of felt that people really weren't opening up. I think they were afraid that they didn't know where the recording was going to go, and
That
so
makes sense.
and so we turned that off. But because we use closed captioning, we actually have like the transcript of it. So we do, but we use it even more for minutes for myself. So
I try to attend, but a lot of times it's not convenient, and it would be nice to be able to.
yeah, we're still every the second Tuesday of the
Yeah,
month. I've been a little bit of a stickler about sticking to that time
Good.
meeting, even though PTAs come and go in that same time slot. But yeah, so
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
I would be interested if by chance, if you learn anything or you felt that it was beneficial to the board and the district from the two programs that you're attending, if if you felt that it was appropriate to share some of that information, I think it would be beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, no problem. I'll be happy to report back next go around.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else for board subcommittee or parent-teacher association liaisons? No, I have one for CMS. Let me just get up my email. So CMS, School Community Association, and they had some items to report on. Let me just see. They have a trunk or treat is occurring on October 29th from 5:30 to 7:30. Donations will be received, candy donations will be received through October 25th. They will be having their book fair November 11th through November 15th. Family night at the book fair will be on November 12th. Their next meeting will be on November 13th. It'll be at 7:30 via Zoom. And there is a change to the CMS Halloween parade this year, October 31st. It will be a 1:30 start, and it will actually take place at Turkey Brook Park. And any questions? No? All right, that's
No
all I
questions,
have.
but I'd like to add, you just reminded me that the Mountain View Trunk or Treat is this Friday, October 18th at 6 o'clock.
Wonderful. And I have nothing for the President's report. And we will move on to public comments on action items. Members of the community may comment on any action item prior to board discussion. Please state your name and address for the record. Please speak clearly into the mic. All comments must be respectfully presented. Abusive or obscene comments will not be tolerated. And please note, this is on action items listed in the agenda only. And the mic is open, everyone.
I'm back already. Amy Marini, 3 Mills Trail in Long Valley, but my daughter's out of district placed here. So I have a question for Ms. McDermott. So I was actually in the car when you were speaking about the DLM reports and stuff like that. So I had to write my question down because I'm all over the place. So I know you guys were talking about similar to reviewing the grade level curriculum and providing the tiered level of supports for the students that needed supports because of Lincoln and iReady. But my concern is that, how are we supporting the students that already are in the thick of the IEPs, and yet they still seem to be struggling with the DLM, considering they're the ones that already have the most support? So that's just my question.
So just to clarify, so your question is how our students are being supported within their IEPs in order to move closer to progression on the DLM. Yet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to Ms. Sazak and Ms. Huffman, because I think it's important for them to be involved in that conversation, and we'll follow up with you.
All right, perfect, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else for agenda action items? Nope, seeing none. We'll move on to approval of our monthly expenditures and reports. And I will go with actually Ms. Fitzgerald. We'll hit you twice today.
That's all right. I'd like to make a motion to approve monthly expenditures and reports, action items 6.1 through 6.4.
Second.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Nope, seeing none. Ms. Schoening, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Aquino?
Yes.
Mrs. Fenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Figuera?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendez?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Orzillo?
Yes.
Mr. Strelacci?
Yes.
Mrs. Narcisse?
Yes. And we'll move to personnel action items. Mrs. Aquino.
Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, I'd like to move action items 7.1 through 7.18.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? No. We'll take a roll call, please, then, Ms. Schoening.
Mrs. Aquino?
Yes.
Mrs. Fenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Figuera?
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendez?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Orzillo?
Yes.
Mr. Strelacci?
Yes.
Mrs. Narcisse?
Yes. And we'll move to curriculum and technology action items. Mrs. Fenton.
Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, I make a motion to approve action items 8.1 to 8.7.
Second.
And do we have any questions or comments from the board? Nope, seeing none. We'll move to roll call, please.
Mrs. Fenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Aquino?
Yes.
Mrs. Figuera?
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendez?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Orzillo?
Yes.
Mr. Strelacci?
Yes.
Mrs. Narcisse?
And yes. And we'll go back to Ms. Fitzgerald for finance and operation action items.
Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, I'd like to make a motion to approve action items 9.1 through 9.7.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Mrs. Aquino?
Yes.
Mrs. Fenton?
Yes.
Mrs. Figuera?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendez?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Orzillo?
Yes.
Mr. Strelacci?
Yes.
Mrs. Narcisse?
Yes, and that brings us to administrative action item 10.1 is not listed there.
What is that?
No.
No? Okay, so 10.1 will not be on the agenda. All right, and then we are going to move to old business. Members of the board may comment on any item or topic that was previously discussed by the board. Do we have any? Okay, seeing none. We'll move to new business. Members of the board may introduce any new item or topic of discussion for the board to consider. Do we have any?
What was this, old business?
New.
Did you have old business, Tony?
Old or new?
Well,
Go for it.
Okay.
it's all right. We'll go in both categories.
Yeah, I put something together here because I feel very strongly about it, and I wanted to give this message to the board. And it has to do with the referendum. During my tenure on the board, I've made it a practice to visit our schools at least twice a year, usually in the fall and the spring, sometimes more. And I speak to the principals, I speak to the staff, I go in some classrooms and I tour. And about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I notified the superintendent's office that I would be doing it again, and I did. And after touring this last time, I came away feeling very unsettled. And the reason why I felt unsettled is because our schools are either at capacity or approaching capacity or have exceeded capacity. Especially in the elementary schools. In the elementary schools, we're starting to do one-on-one instruction in the hallway. We're going back to art on a cart. We have 2 and 3 interventionists working in the same room. Believe it or not, we're teaching instrumental music in an alcove in a hallway. And because of the increased need for special ed, our class sizes for core instruction are rising. And they may get to a point where the state will not allow you to have that many students in a school based on their formula for square footage for the kids. We did a demographic study which we got reported to us at the end of 22, got reported to us in early 23. That study told us, and they do quite extensive research on that with births, applications of homes, whatever, moving trends, and they said that by 2027, they like to make 5-year projections, and they said by 2027 we will have 300 more kids. I believe it'll be 500 or more because one of the things they didn't take into consideration was immigration at that point. We tried to solve this problem by going out for a referendum. Dr. Bangia, Kevin Stansbury, Glenn Miller, architect, bondsman, everybody, we spoke to a lot of groups. But I believe it failed for 2 reasons. We only got 900 yes votes. I believe it failed for 2 reasons. Number one, we made a convoluted referendum. We lost focus on what the priority was, which is classroom space, which is what we really needed. And a lot of the town people told me, listen, all of the things you wanted to do and you may need should have been put in your budget over the years. And that's, I think, the main reason why they voted that down. So what we have to do now is we really need to go out this spring and this fall for another referendum. And we have 4,700 students. If you only take 1 parent per student, and you even knock off some of that, you'll get at least 2,000 to 2,500 votes. That's the group you should be going after, the people with children who have children in the district, because they're the ones who are going to be affected by this thing. It has to be done. I just, I'm not going to be on the board, but you people are going to have a heck of a decision to make here. But you need to go back out for that referendum. You heard tonight that already we're going for modulars. Well, that's not a bond. You can't amortize that over 25 years. That's money that's going to be coming out of your operating budget every year. And what is it going to be? $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year? What are you taking out of the budget? What are you sacrificing out of that budget to pay those modulars? That's because the referendum went down. And even if you pass a referendum and you get ready to build, it takes 2 years before you can occupy it. So you really have to get going on this thing. and push it, it's going to cost about $20 to $22 million to put 8 classrooms on Tents and 8 classrooms on Sand Shore, and an auxiliary gym, and 2 classrooms on at the middle school. That's what you have to go out for, that and that only. And hopefully, you'll pass it. And if that's going to be the case, I'm estimating maybe it's going to run $4 or $5 a month on the average home. That's all it'll take for that. But now you have to look at the long picture here, too. And the long picture is that bubble's going to move up. The capacity at the high school right now, when we did the 2003 referendum and we passed it in 2004, we built that school to house 1,600 students. And through different programs and what we have made rooms into, such as the anatomy lab and maker spaces and what have you, that capacity is down to 1,490 now. And right now we have 1,525 students up there. So that's the long picture, because you got to pass this thing right away, because now you're going to have to pass another one in 2029. And that's the best time to pass it, because that's when the bond that we put on in 2004 matures. And you might have a wash with a very, very little tax increase on that. But you're going to actually need to do that. I mean, these are things that have to be done, folks. I mean, regardless of what happens, if you don't do that, we're going to have one heck of a problem. I was asked a question by Mrs. Melendez when you interviewed me, what's our biggest challenge? I said our biggest challenge was space. It still is. That's your biggest challenge. You'll handle a budget, you'll cover this, but you have to get seats for these kids. You're not going to have the seats for them. Let me just review my notes here. I wrote so many things down that I wanted to tell you, because I'm just really, so upset with when I went through these buildings the other day, how I felt about it. It's just, I've been through this. I've been through this twice. I've been through it when we had to move the 6th grades up to the middle school so that we had enough room. We only had 3 elementaries then. And then that school became overcrowded, and finally we passed in 2000, whatever it was, and we opened up the middle school. And we were able to recapture the old middle school and make it an elementary. That solved our problem for that. I mean, I've been through it twice. But folks, what's going to happen with these increases, remember, 500 people is a cumulative figure. We're getting people every year. We had one year, because of just the geography and the students and what have you, the level, we had a bus, kindergarten kids, from Bud Lake down to Mountain View. That was the only space. We kept our fingers crossed, because A, it's a long time for a 5-year-old to be on a bus. And number 2, we were transporting them across town. It was a safety factor. This has got to be done. Let me see what else I put down here. Probably not a bunch of nonsense, but yes, I've wanted to bring this to your attention, because I'm not going to be on the board anymore. I'll always be around if you should want my advice, or I'll always help, because I've supported this school district for 55 years. I love the school district. We have a great school district. And the only way you're ever going to be able to build classrooms or do construction is through referendum. There is no way it can be put on a budget at a 2% cap. Where are you going to get $22 million? You're not. So it has to be done, but you have to give the town people the reason. This town has been so gracious and supportive of our district. We passed the first one for that middle school was $40 million, the largest in Morris County at that time. Then we passed another one to high school for 47 million, was it, Kevin? $50 million. I mean, the town supported it, but they didn't the last 2 times, because they didn't see the worth in what we were doing. And we have to give them the worth in what we're doing. So, I mean, I just wanted to give you that message, because I was really so unsettled. I'm looking, I said, where are these kids going to sit? And trust me, you're going to get to the point whereby, oh, by the way, you're going to get these modulars. Unless the law has changed, I'm not sure, you can correct me. you can only use them for instruction for 2 years. Then you have to go back and get a waiver. Now, they'll give you a waiver the first time, but that second time, you better show them you have plans for construction, or you're not going to get a waiver. And then you got to use it for storage or something like that. And it's expensive. Those things are expensive.
Tony, I'd like to piggyback off of that because as you're saying this, I believe they're approximately, aren't they around $1 million, like between the
For each
plumbing,
one,
the
yeah.
electric, the foundations?
Well, the last cost I heard, the latest cost I heard was when we were doing a referendum, it's going to cost $3 million. Well,
Yeah.
if it's going to cost $3 million based on the terms of the lease and rates and everything else, you're going to be spending $400,000 to $600,000 a year out of your budget.
That to me is a waste of
So,
money
so
for a temporary
folks,
fix.
I wanted to tell you that because it's been bothering me for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I just wanted to get that out, but I wanted to get all my facts straight for you and everything else. And tonight, believe me, I did not give you any hyperbole. I gave you fact and reality. And now it's going to be up to you. You have to challenge this coming year, along with Anthony, I see is here too, who'll be on the board too. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Strelacci, I don't know if everyone out home, recognizes, one, how passionate you are about this, but one of the other topics we also spoke about in finance was we're having to reuse, right, repurpose that multi-purpose room at Mountain View to convert to preschool classrooms, which comes with requirements. We're losing more space. And those rooms also require that each one has a toilet room for the younger students as well, taking up more space. But the other piece that we're coming to find out of the planning board in the town is there's more building going on in the next 2 to 3 years. So we have, the houses that were potentially estimated in that study we had, that was almost, 500 to 600 students. Now they're talking about apartments coming in or condos that'll be another almost 300 students. And that's just new students. We're already, Mr. Strelacci said, busting at the seams and having to put special programs in hallways and, rooms that are not truly accommodating for the programs that the students, should be receiving properly.
Well, the good news is when you decide to go back out to the high school, when we did the addition the last time at the high school, we left a footprint. We were able to, you're going to be able to put a third floor on top of the science wing. Be minimum construction, and that probably could take another 150 students. So, we laid the groundwork for some of this work, but you'll be maturing. It happened this time, but we didn't take advantage of it. You'll be maturing upon. That debt service will go away. We'll just continue with the debt service. You don't have to raise the taxes a fortune. You might have to raise a couple bucks, but based on course at that time. But this is going to have to be done because we're just. I said enough.
I think we all agree. Thank you.
I think we agree, and I also think that you are definitely the historic with a lot of knowledge and a lot of passion for this, and this is impactful to the students, not just the parents or people that don't have, everyone is a stakeholder here, and that does. And the one good thing is we're lucky people are coming here to the district. They want to be with us.
Got great programs.
Yeah, phenomenal. With that, do we have anyone else from the board with new or old business? No? I want to say thank you, though, Mr. Strelacci, for that. I know that, you always bring that to the table and with such, truth and honesty and passion with regards to the topic.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
With that, we'll open up to public comments. Students, parents, employees, and community members may comment on any item of interest pertaining to the Mount Olive School District. Please state your name and address for the record. All comments must be respectfully presented. Abusive or obscene comments will not be tolerated. The mic is open. We got the awkward silence.
No, who's going first?
I'm going to remember this time. Antoine Gales, 13 Tall Oaks Lane.
Dr. Antoine Gales.
Yes, so good evening, members of the board and the public. I'm not a statistician or a psychometrician, but your report is the stuff that dreams are made of. I love seeing the numbers. And so the information that you gave had me think of 5 quick things that is probably happening behind the scenes. So forgive me if I am preaching to the choir, but there are kids behind the numbers. So here are the things that I thought about as you were presenting. You were talking about the MLL program and how strong the program is for MLL. So my question was whether or not there was any sheltered instruction for teachers outside of the MLL program, because that could make the difference. Because in my experience, students do very well in their ELL class. But when they leave their ELL math or ELL reading or writing and they go to a regular social studies class or a science class or math class, if those teachers don't have those same strategies and best practices, students may lose some momentum there. So that was a question, food for thought. The other one was the data regarding our subgroups. I always think about this issue of disproportionality and what is the percentage of the subgroup population with respect to the total population, because I noticed that our Asian students are still outperforming every other subgroup. So it will be great to see the subgroup population as a total of the full population. At a glance, as you were going through some of the charts with the different levels, so at a glance, I could see, because the slides were moving kind of quickly, I could see that in some cases, some grade levels, the students who were at level 1 and 2 were increasing from one year to the next. So has there been any analysis done to see whether or not you are decreasing the levels of 1s and 2s and the correlation between those students who are going to 4s and 5s and whether or not you can kind of make some inference? And that will give you the opportunity to identify students, because we are talking about individualizing and personalizing instruction. So how do you identify those students who are at levels 1 and 2 to begin impacting those percentages in the right direction? And then that led me to thinking about the high impact, the High Impact Accelerated Learning grant that Mount Olive got, and how that was being utilized, and whether or not you saw any correlation between using that as a tier 2 or tier 3 and impacting those students who need more support. And then finally, in talking about the standards, I don't know if we still use Rubicon Atlas, but Rubicon Atlas has a standards audit function, and it would be great if we're using that audit function to see which standards teachers are hitting, how frequently they're hitting those standards, so that you can make some determination about, in addition to looking at the scope and sequence and your instructional material, how are teachers, how frequently they're hitting those standards in order to improve student outcomes. Thank you very much. That was all that came to my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gales. Do you have anyone else from the public? Oh,
Come on up.
we got the tag team.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Lamondola, co-president of the Education Association of Mount Olive. I live at Sand Shore School in room 172. And I just wanted to take a minute to share with you all, because I don't know if everybody knows, but our association does support a lot of projects or community events that our schools are doing. And so recently, our PEP grant coordinator, Mary Hund from over at TINTS, secured some funds to support all of the trunk or treats at all of the elementary schools, also to help support the staff participate and be a part of it. And she also went through a couple of others that we've recently gotten approved. For Tints Road, she'll be supporting, or EMO will be supporting Read Across America at Tints. We will also be sponsoring the first Lego League competition in December here in Mount Olive, and the National Honor Society in May. And there's still more grants coming in, so hopefully we'll be able to be present and a part of more of these events throughout the district as the year goes on.
It's terrific.
Thank you.
And I am Ronan Carter, the other co-president of EMO, and I live at various places in the high school, mostly B303. So EMO would just also like to thank, in particular, Dr. Banja and Mrs. McDermott for being available, open to our suggestions, and just willing to hear us out for a variety of topics and meetings, even though those topics might not be the most fun to talk about all the time. We appreciate your patience and availability and flexibility with all that, so we just want to thank you publicly for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have it ask if you guys have more information, like the grants that you like to share, if you could come or email them in and we could share them out in the committee and the liaison reports. I think that would be great to make sure the community hears, what's actually also, the relationship and what you're supporting within our schools too.
Thank you.
Any other comments at them? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close that out then. We're going to move on to board comments. Members of the board may comment on any item of interest pertaining to the Mount Olive School District. And I'll just start right down at the end, Mr. Orzillo.
I guess I would like to just thank Tony for bringing that up, because we do have a serious issue here. So that's really it. Thanks.
I think it's all been said. No comment from me.
No comments.
Jeez, I just want to say thank you to Mrs. McDermott for your presentation.
Can we speak into the microphone? We can't hear anything.
Thank you, Mrs. McDermott, for your presentation.
Mrs. Fenton?
I am going to ditto that. No, but honestly, I emailed you because we got to preview it in C&T, and I'm very refreshed. All the hard work that everybody does for our curriculum. I know it's not the best, but you know what? Knowing that we're trying and we're really looking and we're really trying to make things work, it's very impressive and it's very much appreciated. And Tony, I couldn't have said it better than what you said, and I really hope that our referendum, we go out for referendum and it passes. That's it.
All right, I'm going to swing it over to Mr. Strelacci.
I just want to congratulate and happy to see Mrs. Vogel, Supervisor Mawassa here.
Oh, yes, welcome back.
She went on her cane
It's
there.
fancy.
That fancy one.
It's the sparkling
Other than that, I know.
Oh,
Abel?
got a name.
Kane and April.
Get it, Kane and
Yeah.
Abel. Oh my goodness, I can't.
We missed you.
And I would like to thank Ms. McDermott, too. That was a very good report. Thank you.
And Ms.
Thank you.
Figueroa.
Same. Yep. Thank you, Ms. McDermott. It's a long report. Thank you for explaining it all.
All right, I guess I'll close it out. Besides not just thank you, Mrs. McDermott, I'd like to also thank all of the staff and the teachers and the aides, the hands-on, everyone down to the classroom has a piece of this, success and, the pieces of improvement that they're working on. I think it really speaks volumes to it takes a village, and we really do appreciate, and I think the whole public appreciates all of that hard work that goes into it. And with that, I'm going to close out. Any comments from Dr. Bangia?
At this point, I'd just like to, once again, thank you, Mr. McDermott, and also the EMO leadership. It's really been a pleasure working with them, and certainly our conversations may not be as always as, on the same page, but we agree to disagree, and at the end of the day, we both want what's best for our students in the district. So thank you for their leadership as well.
All right, with that, we're going to close out, and I will take a motion to recess into confidential session.
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a second? And be it resolved that the board meet in confidential session for the purpose of discussing personnel, matters of attorney-client privilege, any pending litigation, confidential pupil matters, and be it further resolved that the matters discussed in confidential session be disclosed to the public when the reason for confidentiality no longer exists. Action may be taken. Do I have a roll call on that? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are now in confidential session.
I make a motion to adjourn this
So
meeting.
moved.
Second?
Third.
Sit over here.
Can we have roll call? Are all in favor?
Aye.
Who did the first and who did the second? You did,
I moved it.
you moved it?
And she seconded.
Okay, they did a, like a tally. Jen has the most, like, second.
John, I'm sorry. I'm like delirious.
Credit, working all day.